Congresswoman Lauren Underwood, and I proudly represent the 14th Congressional District. Since joining the Congress, I have served on the Homeland Security Committee, and I currently serve on the Appropriations Subcommittee on Homeland Security, which has jurisdiction over the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency and many of our country's cybersecurity programs. Can you not hear me? Okay. I want to thank everyone here today for taking the time to learn how to protect your organizations from cyber attacks and how to make our nation safer by doing so. I want to especially thank Clark Kerker and the Illinois Chamber of Commerce for your partnership and leadership and for ensuring that the information in this briefing reaches as many Illinois businesses as possible. The attacks we've seen over the past year underscore the urgent need to modernize our approach to securing our critical infrastructure. That urgency is being felt now more than ever, with evolving intelligence indicating that Putin is exploring options for cyber attacks against American companies and critical infrastructure. Strong partnerships between the public and private sectors are the only way we're going to successfully defend against the evolving threats of today and tomorrow. We especially need to ensure that small and medium-sized companies have the tools they need to remain secure. In 2021, more than 40% of cyber attacks targeted small and medium-sized businesses, preying on companies that too often lack the resources and personnel to implement cyber hygiene measures. As part of this collaborative approach, the federal government has developed resources and guidance for businesses and organizations to help protect their systems and networks. I'm very grateful that today we have Alex Joves and Eric Brailsford with us to share those federal resources with all of you and to answer your questions. Alex Joves is the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, also known as CISA, Regional Director for Region 5, which covers Illinois. Alex has over 25 years of government service, including in the Coast Guard, the White House, and the Department of Homeland Security, where he's worked extensively in counterterrorism and critical infrastructure protection. And Special Agent Eric Brailsford is here with us from the FBI Cybercrime Division. Eric has over 15 years of experience specializing in and leading cyber investigations, including in ransomware, data breaches, and financial account takeovers. As business leaders, you all play an essential role in not only your local communities, but now in our national security. So thank you again to everyone participating in today's briefing for doing your part to harden your company's cyber defenses and mitigate cybersecurity risks. I look forward to continuing this important work with all of you. And with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Alex Joves of CISA.
Thanks, Congresswoman Underwood, and great to see you again. First of all, again, thanks to you for your leadership and support of CISA, both on House Homeland and now House Appropriations. Again, it's great to be working with your team. I know we've worked on community college safety, physical security at government facilities, STEM scholars, and election security work in your district. So thank you again for inviting us for this very important brief and giving us this opportunity to talk to the Illinois Chamber of Commerce. As Congresswoman Underwood said, I'm Alex Joves. I am your CISA Region 5 Regional Director. I cover the 6 Great Lakes states here, again, very similar to FEMA's 6 states, but of course we are headquartered here in Chicago, Illinois, and in the state of Illinois. So for CISA, as the nation's cyber defense agency, we stand ready to help organizations prepare for and respond to and mitigate the impact of cyber attacks. I do want to call out that I'm joined today by one of our Region 5 cybersecurity advisors, Bill Nash, who is a former state CISO, and he'll be on us later as well if, during the question and answer period. So if we can go ahead and go to the next slide. So CISA recommends all organizations, regardless of size, adopt a heightened posture when it comes to cybersecurity and protecting their most critical assets. CISA has been working with our partners for months to ensure preparedness in the event of a cyber attack related to the Russian invasion of Ukraine. In light of President Biden's statement from last week, we are reiterating our warning to partners to adopt a heightened security posture. As Congresswoman Underwood had stated, there is now evolving intelligence that Russia may be exploring options for potential cyber attacks. And I understand that the slides may not be showing right now. So let's see if we can get those. It may be a little bit of a lag. And again, if these slides for some reason are not showing, all of this information is going to be available on the CISA.gov website, which I'll talk about here next. And just let me know if you can see those slides when they come up. And I think that's what they're saying. Try to log out and log back.
We can see them.
Okay, great. I think we're on slide 4 now. So a couple things. So for specific steps that your organizations and individuals can take now, CISA encourages all organizations to visit our Shields Up webpage available at CISA.gov. The site is regularly updated with the latest technical products and security guidance, as well as steps that organizations, businesses, and individuals can take to heighten their security posture and ensure they are prepared for a disrupted cyber incident. I do want to call out this third bullet here. So CISA encourages any organization that thinks it may be impacted by a cyber incident to report that information immediately. When cyber incidents are reported quickly, we can use this information to render assistance and provide warning to prevent other organizations from falling victim to that attack. This information is also critical to identifying trends that can help efforts to protect the homeland. Organizations to report unusual cyber activity or cyber incidents 24/7 to report at CISA.gov, the 888-282-0870 number. And again, I apologize if the slides aren't showing up here. We'll make sure that these slides are sent out to the whole group afterwards, because I know a lot of this information is there, but you can also find it on CISA.gov, the Shields Up website. Or of course, you can call your local CISA or FBI field office. In Illinois as well, we have strong partnerships in Springfield with the State Terrorism and Fusion Center there, and also with the State Homeland Security Advisor team. So we are connected. So whether that report is coming in through CISA, FBI, or your state partners there, we are all connected and talking daily, and as incidents occur, are able to triage and commit resources to help your businesses. Okay, next slide, please. So there's a couple immediate steps that CISA is recommending for all organizations, and again, regardless of size, to adopt. And for folks that have been in the cybersecurity world for a while, again, some of this stuff will seem, again, things that you are doing every day, but we just want to call it out. So one there, and this is, again, all available on the CISA.gov Shields Up website, but number one, reduce the likelihood of damaging cyber intrusion. So in particular, validate that all of your remote access to the organization's network and privileged or administrative access requires multi-factor authentication, MFA. We're going to cover that a couple times here as we go forward in the presentation. Number two, take steps to quickly detect a potential intrusion. So ensure that your cybersecurity and your IT personnel are focused on identifying and quickly assessing any unexpected or unusual network behavior. Number three, ensure that the organization is prepared to respond if an intrusion occurs. That means designating a crisis response team with main points of contact for a suspected cyber incident and roles and responsibilities within the organization. And the fourth bullet there, maximizing your organization's resilience to a destructive cyber incident, in particularly test backup procedures to ensure that critical data can be rapidly restored if the organization is impacted by ransomware or a destructive cyber attack. Ensure your backups are isolated from your network connections. So just again, going through these 4 steps here, there are, if you go through the website and the steps on the CISA.gov Shields Up, there are more points there for you to follow. But by implementing these steps above, all organizations can make near-term progress toward improving cybersecurity and resilience. Can we go to the next slide, please? So for knowing that this is for the Chamber of Commerce, just some tips as well for corporate leaders to make sure they are also adopting a heightened security posture. So number one there, in this heightened threat environment, senior management should empower their CISOs, their chief information security officers, their IT security personnel by including them in their decision-making process for risk to their company, and ensure that the entire organization understands that security investments are a top priority in the immediate term. On lowering reporting thresholds, in this heightened threat environment, reporting thresholds should be significantly lower than normal. Senior management should establish an expectation that any indications of malicious cyber activity, even if it's blocked by your security control, should be reported to CISA, FBI, or your state officials. Participating in a test of response plans. If you haven't already done it, senior management should participate in a tabletop exercise to ensure familiarity with how your organization will manage a cyber incident to not only your company, but also companies within your supply chain. Focus on continuity. Senior management should ensure that such systems have been identified and that continuity tests have been constructed to ensure that critical business functions can remain subsequent to a cyber intrusion. This includes what we covered just previously on ensuring your backups. And then plan for the worst. Again, you should ensure that exigent measures can be taken to protect your organization's most critical assets in case of intrusion, including disconnecting high impact parts of your network if necessary. Okay, we can go to the next slide. When you go on the CISA.gov Shields Up website, you'll find a lot of resources on ransomware. Obviously, this is a big problem for all organizations. So I do want to highlight for detailed information, you can visit the stopransomware.gov website and follow the steps if you've been unfortunately hit by ransomware. I've been hit by ransomware page. There's also a checklist there if you've experienced a ransomware attack on this ransomware guide, and you can walk through this checklist to take you through the response process from detection to containment and eradication. And again, some of these steps that we highlighted here are what you're going to find in that checklist, but I will again recommend that stopransomware.gov. That's the government site that we're again recommending all partners look to, especially if you've been hit by ransomware, or again, you want to make sure you've got your posture as secure as possible to protect against ransomware. Okay, next slide. And again, I think this is one I near and dear to my heart because of we all obviously have families in our personal lives as well. So what can you do to protect yourself and your family? Again, number one there, implement multi-factor authentication on your accounts. I know we've talked about MFA. Multi-factor authentication can make you 99% less likely to get hacked. So enable multi-factor authentication on your email, your social media, your online shopping, your financial service accounts. And don't forget for your kids, your gaming and streaming entertainment services as well. The next bullet there, again, update your software. In fact, turn on your automatic updates. So we all know, and as we've seen every day, bad actors will exploit flaws in the system. So update that operating system on your mobile phones, your tablets, and your laptops, and update your applications as well, especially those web browsers on all of your devices. Leverage that automatic updates for all devices and applications and operating systems. Think before you click. Again, I think this is most folks understand this, but more than 90% of successful cyber attacks start with a phishing email. Phishing, I think we all know, is a scheme where a link or web page looks legitimate, but it's a trick designed by bad actors to have you reveal your passwords, social security number, credit cards, or other sensitive information. Once they have that information, they can use it on legitimate sites, and they can try to get you to run malicious software, also known as malware. If it's a link you don't recognize, trust your instincts and think before you click. And then the final there, again, nothing new, but I think we just want to re-emphasize a lot of these basic cyber essentials. Use your strong passwords. Our world is increasingly digital and increasingly interconnected. So while we must protect ourselves, it's going to take all of us to really protect the systems we rely on. And this is the last slide I have for you. I think what I wanted to emphasize additional resources that are available to you. Again, all of this information is available on CISA.gov Shields Up, but there are free cyber services, the Knowing Exploited Vulnerabilities Catalog, cyber advisories here that we've released jointly with the FBI and NSA, and a lot of these other resources that are highlighted here. I just want to, as I wrap up my part of this presentation, call out some of the alerts and advisories that are waiting for you on the CISA.gov website. So starting in January, the basic one that we really got out to everyone was understanding and mitigating Russian state-sponsored cyber threats to critical infrastructure. Again, in that report has technical details that your cyber and IT teams can use use to make sure they understand those tactics that have been used overseas. Recently, we've had a Conti ransomware alert advisory, destructive malware advisory that's been used overseas. We've also seen, again, how they have been using, again, a former print nightmare Microsoft vulnerability as well. And just in the past week, 3 advisories that have been put on the website. One on ensuring and strengthening the cybersecurity of your SATCOM network providers and customers. 2 based on indictments that were released by the Department of Justice. Again, tactics, techniques, and procedures of indicted state-sponsored Russian cyber actors targeting the energy sector. And finally, the one just released yesterday, mitigating attacks against uninterruptible power supply UPS devices. So I encourage you, again, all of this information is available on the Shields Up website. Please do take a look at that website, use the resources that are there, contact CISA, any of your federal partners. You do have here in Illinois 3 cybersecurity advisors, and have all the support of all our cyber technical assistants at headquarters. But thank you again to Representative Underwood for getting us to that number. Now we continue to grow that number of specific cyber advisors to the team, 2 here in Chicago area and 1 based in Springfield as well. But then can, again, garner all the other expertise from headquarters and our other federal and state partners. So thanks again. All of this is on our CISA.gov website. I will end at that point and be around for questions afterwards. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Alex. And thanks for staying around for questions. I certainly have a couple for you myself. But first, let's turn it over to Eric.
Hey, thank you very much for the opportunity to be here today. Just confirm that everybody hear me all right?
Yes.
All right, fantastic. And
we can.
Fantastic. And are you guys able to see the slides I'm showing right now?
Yes.
All right, fantastic. All right.
Yes.
Again, appreciate the opportunity to be here. Thank you to Representative Underwood. And
Agent Brausfold, can you put your PowerPoint in presentation mode?
Yeah, one second. Pause 1 second. All right. Does everyone see it in the presentation mode now?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, fantastic. All right. Again, very appreciative of the opportunity to be here today and to speak to a great group like this. Obviously, cyber threats are always a great concern to any organization, but especially so in the times we're currently find ourselves in today. So, and as was very well highlighted in the CISA presentation, the increased threat level, given the circumstances between Russia and Ukraine, certainly raised the level of concern, I think, for everyone, both from a government perspective and certainly from a private sector perspective as well, in terms of how we should be approaching security and measures we should be trying to take to hopefully ensure that nothing untoward happens to your organizations. So briefly, at a very high level, with respect to the FBI, combating these cyber threats, both from a state-sponsored perspective, so foreign governments engaging in cyber-related activities, as well as traditional criminal actors engaging in hacking activities, are the number 2 and number 3 overall priorities for the FBI, behind only combating the threat of a terrorist attack. So the FBI has placed the highest possible priority on combating the threat of cyber attacks and going after the threat actors engaging in this activity. And partnering with our fellow federal agencies, as well as state and local governments, as well as the private sector, and doing everything we possibly can to hopefully mitigate and prevent any sort of attacks from occurring. But in the event that a cyber incident does occur, utilizing all of our resources to see that it is fully investigated and the individuals responsible for it are brought to justice. And when we're talking about cyber attacks, I briefly want to touch on who are our adversaries, who are we concerned about, who's engaging in these attacks against the U.S. government, against industry and companies and organizations here in the United States as well as around the world. And at a fairly high level, we have them broken down into these categories. The ones of greatest concern are state-sponsored cyber threat actors. So these are foreign governments engaging in adversarial cyber attacks against the U.S. government, against U.S. organizations, countries such as Russia, China, North Korea, countries that obviously do not necessarily have the best interests of the United States first and foremost in their minds. Second broad category of threat actors we have a great concern with are what you would think of as traditional computer hackers, individuals engaging in cyber-related crime for financial gain for themselves. So these threat actors are predominantly in countries such as Russia, Eastern Europe. But we've seen growth in other areas around the world as well, such as West Africa, the Far East as well, and even homegrown threat actors here in the United States. The third category of threat actors that we deal with would be individuals engaging in hacking activity, not necessarily for financial gain, but in some situations for promoting an ideological belief. These are people we would term as hacktivists. Other people would sort of loosely lump into this category and group would be individuals engaging in hacking activity for notoriety, tend to be juveniles that kind of fall into this category. And then the last group I want to highlight briefly is the threat of insiders within your organization that may be engaged in cyber-related criminal conduct. So this can be a disgruntled employee. This could be somebody that's been recruited by one of these other threat actor groups, be it somebody that's working for a foreign government, or somebody that is part of a criminal hacking gang that is simply bribing or offering someone within your organization money or something else to assist them with getting into your environment. So we've certainly seen a lot of those sorts of situations. So if those are the threat actors, what are the most prevalent attacks that we're currently seeing today? First and foremost would be data breaches and recently kind of that paired with ransomware activity. Data breach activity we see associated with both state-sponsored related actors as well as criminally motivated cyber threat actors. And the end goal is simply to identify and suck out of your organization anything of value, any sort of data that can be monetized or is of use from an intelligence perspective. If you're talking about a foreign government engaged in this activity, such as PII type information, payment card information, proprietary sensitive trade secret type information from your organization that could be of benefit to somebody else. A tremendous amount of this sort of activity. Ransomware is also a rampant problem, as was highlighted on this presentation, and I'll touch on that a bit more here in the next couple of slides. Business email compromise is also one of the most significant sort of cyber-related threat activities we've seen individuals engaging in. I'll also be talking about that a little bit more in a couple of slides. And the last two I wanted to highlight at a high level before I dive a little deeper into some of the previous two topics are financial account takeovers first, which traditionally this has been individuals attempting to gain access and control of your online bank accounts, online investment accounts, any sort of financial account that they can gain access to and drain those funds and transfer those funds to some other account that they have access or control of. What we've seen a tremendous growth in recently is threat actors targeting cryptocurrency accounts in particular. And one of the most common avenues we see these accounts being compromised is the threat actors leveraging what's known as SIM swapping. Basically, where the threat actors are able to port or take over your mobile phone service and port that service to a phone that the threat actor controls. And why are they doing this? Because your mobile phone number is often tied to your online account access for two-factor authentication. So if I forget my password, I get a PIN code sent to my mobile phone number. Well, if the threat actors have gained control of my mobile phone and that PIN code that reset code is then being sent via text message to a phone that the bad guy controls and not my phone, since they've sort of swapped the service out. So we've seen a lot of growth in that particular tactic being used in the last year in particular. And then lastly, just denial of service and destructive attacks. We also see a significant amount of this activity as well, simply where attackers are attempting to deny you the legitimate use of your resources via denial of service attacks on your websites or destructive sort of wiper attacks with malicious software that might get into your networks. With respect to data breaches and ransomware, we've actually seen a significant evolution in how ransomware threat actors are conducting themselves, where ransomware traditionally is straightforward enough. Malicious software that's going to encrypt all your data and hold it hostage until you pay a ransom to the threat actor to get your data back, right? Well, in the last 2 years in particular, we've seen a growth where threat actors are pairing traditional ransomware activity with data theft as well. So why are they doing this? Because organizations are getting better at protecting their backups and being able to more effectively recover from traditional ransomware attacks. So to more effectively monetize these attacks for themselves, the threat actors are first stealing as much sensitive information from your organization as possible before encrypting your data. And then they're trying to extort you both from a perspective of getting your decrypted data decrypted, and then also to not release that stolen information to other threat actors by selling it on the dark web or just kind of publishing that information on the internet for anybody to see and download. Threat actors have seen that this is a fairly successful way to incentivize businesses to actually elect to pay a ransom. So it's why they're continuing to engage in that particular pattern of activity. How are we seeing these compromises occurring? Some of which was highlighted in the previous presentation as well. First and foremost, phishing emails. Again, one of the most prevalent threat vectors we see for organizations getting compromised. Unpatched internet-facing applications or systems, and compromised remote access credentials, in particular when two-factor authentication is not put in place. So if organizations are able to effectively guard against these three sorts of threat vectors, they can significantly reduce the likelihood they're going to have any sort of a consequential cyber incident. Once an organization has been compromised, though, what are the threat actors doing? When you're talking about data breaches and ransomware in particular, the threat actors, their end goal is to try and get administrative level access to your environment, in particular, from a Windows perspective, domain administrative level credentials, which would allow them to effectively do whatever they want within your environment. If they're able to get that level of access, there's very little an organization can do to protect themselves before the threat actor ultimately achieves their goal. The amount of ransom we see being demanded varies. In some situations, thousands of dollars all the way up to tens of millions of dollars we've seen, depending on the size of the organization, the level of impact of the attack as well. And when does the ransomware actually occur? We see these attacks getting deployed at off hours, so not when like a system administrator might be actively working and notice something is amiss. So typically at night, weekends, holidays, we see being the prime activity for when the attackers sort of flipping the switch and going overt and deploying ransomware across the enterprise. With respect to paying a ransom or not, the FBI does not advocate organizations pay a ransom simply because it emboldens the criminals to continue engaging in this sort of activity. If nobody paid a ransom, these guys would be out of business. But we also have the caveat that we understand in some situations an organization may find itself in such a position that you have no choice but to pay a ransom in order to be able to get access again to sensitive data that may have been encrypted or stolen by the threat actor. How to mitigate and kind of prevent this from occurring in the first place. And again, I don't want to repeat some of the excellent points CISA already made. So just to highlight a couple of things that may not have already been kind of touched on. So in addition to the multi-factor authentication, which is key, and user awareness training, very important. Consideration of like endpoint detection and response software, where it kind of goes beyond traditional antivirus software, that it is looking more for anomalous behavior in your environment as opposed to just a signature-based sort of detection approach. So to identify threats from more sophisticated actors, solutions such as this are something an organization certainly may want to kind of consider kind of taking a look at. Preventing a more widespread incident. I often tell organizations sort of approach security from the perspective that you're going to have a threat actor get inside your environment, right? You're going to have a device, a computer that gets compromised to some degree. What steps can you take to mitigate the threat of the attacker gaining widespread access in your environment and sort of stemming the bleeding? So first and foremost, not having administrators use privileged accounts for day-to-day activities, right? They should have separate accounts for privileged access versus just day-to-day normal operations, and especially with respect to domain-level administrative accounts, which, as I said before, is sort of the holy grail that the threat actors are attempting to gain access to. You should really have strict limits on the number of domain-level administrators within your organization. Most organizations wouldn't need more than 1 to and maybe up like 10 if you're talking about like a really large size enterprise. Don't have the same administrative password across your environment. So if a threat actor gains access to an administrative level password on one device, don't let that be a cascading threat that the attacker that can then gain access using that same password to every other server within your environment. And then certainly with respect to ransomware, have secure backups that ideally are offline and can't be impacted by a cyber attack. Detecting the attack, I tell organizations focus on not so much who's trying to get into your network, like banging on your firewall, your perimeter defenses. I would focus more on what's the unusual activity within your environment. That's what I would be concerned about. So looking for unusual data exfiltration, spikes in data traffic, like leaving your environment. Those would be the things I would be much more kind of concerned about. And then especially going back to the domain level administrative accounts, pushing out alerts anytime one of those accounts is actually logged into can be a very useful detection mechanism for organizations. So you can see if you have a login to a domain level administrator on a Sunday morning when nobody should be doing that, that should be a giant red flag for your organization. Very briefly, because I want to be sure we have time for questions here at the end. Speaking of the business email compromise, which is another very, very common threat that we see being perpetrated by cyber actors, simply where they gain access to an email account within your organization or a partner that you deal with and attempt to induce you to send a wire transfer to a bank account that they control. So it seems like fairly trivial sort of scheme, but unfortunately it's extraordinarily successful with hundreds of millions of dollars annually that are lost as a result of business email compromise schemes. So as I briefly mentioned, it's a simple concept. They gain access to an email account. They will look through the contents of that email account to look for any upcoming payments your organization may have or partners you're dealing with. And then we'll kind of craft a fake email, either using the compromised email account they directly have access to, or just a fake email account they set up to mimic a legitimate one to send a fraudulent email to induce someone within the finance department of your organization to send a payment to someplace it should not go. You wouldn't think this happens all the time. I've seen instances where organizations have lost over $10 million as a result of what seems like a fairly simple scheme. How do you protect against this? This is actually fairly easy to mitigate. Multifactor authentication for all email access, any kind of remote access to your email. Look at anomalous login activity to your email accounts. If you're seeing logins coming from West Africa, for instance, to your corporate email account, and you're not doing business in that country, then that's probably a giant red flag for you. And then for the people on the receiving ends of these particular emails, simple things, just double check the email address you're responding to, and most importantly, especially for significant financial transactions and wire transfers, ACH transfers that are being requested, don't just rely on email for confirmation that it is legitimate. Actually pick up the phone, talk to who you think you're receiving this email from, and verify that it is actually legitimate. Those sorts of controls can really nip this in the bud. All right, reporting cyber incidents to the FBI. The number one way to do this is the Internet Crime Complaint Center, so ic3.gov. You can also contact your local FBI field office. Here's the main number for the FBI field office here in Chicago, for instance. It is also valuable if you can, to just establish a liaison relationship with someone from the FBI prior to having an incident, just to be able to, one, sort of understand and have the ongoing feedback about sort of current threats that we're actually sort of seeing, and also just have somebody to bounce off of. All right, we're seeing this in our environment. We're not sure if this is something that needs to be reported or not. I would much rather get a phone call and it not be anything of consequence versus not find out about something and it turns out it's a significant incident that we might have been able to assist with. So a couple of screenshots of just the ic3.gov website. So you see the submission page for filing a complaint for general cyber-related crime. And then for ransomware-related incidents, because there's some nuances to the sorts of information we like to collect, they have a special link for that as well. So if you have a ransomware incident, you can kind of follow it that way. Briefly, as I'm wrapping up, I also want to make a pitch for Infragard. Infragard's a partnership between the FBI and the private sector that provides information sharing, allows kind of ongoing communication back and forth between the FBI and sort of like trusted contacts in the private sector. It's generally free to join for your organization. So there's chapters here in Chicago and Springfield, here in Illinois. So if your organization isn't already a member of Infragard, I encourage you to check out the website and see if it's something you might be interested in signing up for. And then last thing I just wanted to kind of highlight are what some of the notices and messages that the FBI in partnership with CISA generally is able to kind of push out. So we have flash messages, private industry notifications, as well as kind of public service announcements. They can provide different levels of granularity about cyber threats that we're actually seeing and that are out there. All these are generally posted on the ic3.gov website. I believe on CISA's website as well. And I believe on CISA's website, you can also request to sign up to receive these automatically to your email account, or also to just sign up for their RSS subscription feed as well to get them if you want to receive them that way. So I would encourage you to take a look at that so you can kind of get ongoing updates of the threats that the federal government is sort of seeing and experiencing. So my email address is here. I would encourage everyone to take that down. As I said, it's really helpful to have a liaison contact. I'm more than happy to be that for your organization here in Illinois. And thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to you, and look forward to some good questions now.
Great, thank you very much, Special Agent. As a reminder, if you have questions, just type them into chat, and then I will ask them. And we do have one in chat from Mark, and he steals my thunder with my favorite topic, which is biometrics. As many of you know, the Chamber is constantly talking about biometrics and their role in the workplace. And Mark asks, what's the role of biometrics? And so he says, does facial recognition and cell phones serve to help mitigate access to accounts? And what's kind of the role of biometrics in general? I tend to think that my facial scan is going to be a lot more secure than my dog's name combined with my alma mater password. Am I on the right track there?
This is from my perspective, I think biometrics generally are going to provide you a higher level of security than sort of a traditional type password, for instance. And I think widespread usage of biometrics for providing authentication to like your online accounts, for instance. I think we're still relatively early on in sort of like a widespread adoption of that for different service providers. So I think as time goes on, that will become more and more prevalent as an option for providing security, or likely ideally is sort of a second form of security, right? So what it ultimately kind of comes down to for any important account, you're going to always want to have, as was highlighted in CISA's presentation, multi-factor authentication, right? Just don't relying on a single form of authentication is ultimately going to put you in a worse position. So whatever allows you to do multi-factor authentication, be it combined with biometrics, is going to be a better option than just any sort of single form of authentication, regardless of what that authentication type is.
Yeah, and I'll just add as well, and again, Bill Nash, you come in as well if you have here. Hi, Bill. But I will just say, and I know I highlighted in our presentation as well, multi-factor authentication, right? So as you heard, it's another another additional add, whether it's your Face ID, that will improve that security. And of course, with that, make sure your phone is updated to the latest operating system, because whether it's Apple iOS, or again a Galaxy, or any other of those phones, Samsung phones that are out there, they are constantly getting these vulnerabilities as well. So keep your iPhones and iPads and all those updated, along with that, again, that biometric that helps with that multi-factor authentication. Bill.
Oh, that multi-factor authentication is absolutely the best thing you can do. I will note, though, that our special agent actually made a very good point here, which is SIM swapping is a thing and does happen, and the biometrics won't help on that front. But in general, it's absolutely the best thing you can do.
That's great to know, because it not only is more secure, it's certainly more convenient when I want to log on to FanDuel and I can just look at my phone, right? So we got another question from Joanne, and she says, do you have any additional advice for organizations that outsource IT as to what appropriate questions they can ask their provider? You know, a lot of our businesses are small organizations. They are not tech specialists. They're salespeople, or they're restaurants. What should they look for in the companies that they're outsourcing this to?
Great question. Alex, do you want me to take that one first?
Oh, please do. I know you're talking to our partners every day about this. So,
well, yeah, the partners are always talking to us, especially in the field folks. But the interesting thing about this question is, most of our small businesses that we talk to, and even our small local governments, are using third parties and relying on them heavily. Whether it's using cloud software as a service, or just their website hosting, whatever it happens to be. Sometimes even their systems used for merchant transactions, right? Each of these is a contract that needs to be managed from the standpoint of the risk of cybersecurity, which is something that a lot of the vendors that folks are using, that are even also small businesses, right, kind of miss that point. And it's part of what the business needs to be worried about. Cybersecurity is a business problem. So with that, CISA actually has some assessments that we do as cybersecurity advisors that help look at how organizations are managing that. One of those is called our entity dependency management assessment. And what it really gets at is how you manage that contract when you're initiating it, and what things you're putting into place when you're putting that contract into place, as well as once you've established it, how you're keeping up to date with it and making sure that they're doing the things that you expect of them to protect the information that you're using them for. And then lastly, and this is the most important thing and is directly the responsibility of the organization, is to have a plan for if that service is unavailable, what are you going to do? And how are you going to be resilient from anything that should happen should that contract not work out the way you're expecting it to? Either the service is not available, or something bad happens to that vendor, or just you lose your connection to it. So one of the things you can reach out to CISA for, actually.
Great. So Harriet asked, what should we do when we get suspicious emails? Should we just delete them? Should we try to unsubscribe? What's the best action when we get what we can realize is a phishing email?
So I'll take that one. I think from the FBI's perspective, our recommendation would be, so if you just get a suspicious email, you think it's a phishing email, nobody just delete it, right? Because err on sort of the side of caution. There's not going to be any sort of like unsubscribe option, unfortunately, for like, phishing or malicious emails that kind of come in. The only thing you'll do is allow the attacker to know that there's somebody on the other end of that might actually be willing to respond in some sort of capacity. So your best practice is really to sort of delete it if you get one of those emails that kind of comes through your spam filters.
Right. All right, so Paul asked, if we're geo-blocking suspect countries' IP addresses at a firewall level, is there anything that can help prevent the usage of a rogue actor with a VPN? So anything to prevent, somebody, you're blocking everybody from Russia, let's say, because you're concerned about world events now. Is there anything to stop somebody in that country that has bad intentions from using a VPN?
So they'll use the VPN to get around hiding where they're coming from, right? So not much you can do from that perspective in terms of the geo-blocking, but that's why we always look at security in layers. It's kind of the onion thing. Really, that geo-blocking is nice. It takes away some of the threat, but also having some intrusion prevention systems or intrusion detection systems at least, or in some cases just simple email filtering software that's available from different vendors. Also, web content filtering is something you can get as a subscription that will help prevent you from going to bad websites. There's many things that you can layer into your security plan to kind of protect from those things that get past the geo-blocking that you do or the firewalls that you have. Some of the products that are doing intrusion prevention and detection will even look at your traffic and analyze it and see if it's something that's normal, something that Special Agent mentioned earlier. All those things kind of add up to be the full package, and recognizing that small businesses can't necessarily afford all of those things, working with third-party providers is usually the best way to approach that, unless you have the in-house expertise to build that kind of program.
So then, taking a step back, from a corporate perspective, is there an appreciable difference in threat level between the black hat hackers and the ransomware guys, and then nation states looking to do us harm? Do we need to be more concerned? Is there a difference in capabilities as it relates to companies here in Illinois?
So I'll take a stab at that. So with respect to the difference in capabilities, right? So, I mean, I think generally speaking, the nation state threat actors are going to be certainly in the deep end of the pool. And then the criminally motivated threat actors, you're going to get a much wider range, right? You have certainly threat actors that are very sophisticated with a lot of capabilities, and then threat actors that are more in the kind of kiddie pool sort of side of things, but it can still cause harm depending on what they're trying to do. So I would be concerned about both. Kind of traditionally, the greater threat to kind of small and mid-sized businesses has been from kind of criminally motivated actors, right? Because those businesses and organizations generally have something that those threat actors want, right? Either money or the ability to be a potential target that the threat actor can monetize in some way, shape, or form. So most, not all, but most small and mid-sized businesses traditionally weren't the target of state-sponsored hacking, right? The main targets of those entities are the government and then large enterprises typically. But given the current landscape that we're in, that might be shifting, right? So where everyone needs to have certainly a heightened level of concern about the threats that's out there. So more broadly, small and mid-sized businesses, I mean, ransomware type threat actors are probably what's more likely to hit you than fill in the blank, foreign government trying to hack your organization. But as I said, just given where we're at right now, everybody just needs to have a elevated level of concern because of the uncertainty of what might occur.
Yeah, that's absolutely spot on. But just to emphasize one additional piece, tacking on to the end of that, what you do to protect yourself from both of those elements is really the same. So do you need to know that it's a nation state or a cyber criminal coming after you? Probably not from a protection standpoint. So all the things we've talked about today, if you're doing those, that's going to help you on both fronts.
So Steve asked, he says he knows that whitelisting was mentioned, but keeping that list current is difficult. Any suggestions as to protocols to follow on that process?
I can take that one. So when you're trying to make that list of allowed applications, it is very challenging. And the previous organization I worked for before CISA, we made some attempts at that. And because of, I worked for the state of Wisconsin, so we had multiple departments, multiple groups of people. Trying to keep up with that was a problem. So if you can, it's a great thing to do. Especially if you can do it on things that are more critical, like your administrators' machines, or even servers that are running your most critical applications. But for a large organization, it's really, really, really difficult to do that. So that's where you rely on these other things that do the heuristics and look at some of the endpoint detection and response capabilities that some of the newer software has, as well as the endpoint protection devices that look at network traffic and look at things that are out of the normal levels. But yeah, if you can do it, absolutely a great thing to do. But if you can't do it for everything, focus on those things that are the most important to your business.
Awesome. I think we have time for one more question. And that is, do you have recommendations for corporate training? So I won't call out any of our members, but I'll talk about the Illinois Chamber of Commerce itself. We have employees that range from Gen Z, who spend more time on TikTok than they do in real life and are very internet savvy, up to baby boomer, one of which I think is still waiting for his inheritance from that Nigerian prince to come through. And so what kind of corporate training would you recommend for, small and medium-sized companies to give their employees, in addition to whatever their IT departments are doing?
So there are some training resources that you can get to from our CISA website, but there's also a lot of companies that will sell you security awareness training for your employees. If you're very, very small and you are very friendly to your local CSAs, we'll also come in and just do a presentation for them, which could be helpful as well. Kind of that cybersecurity 101, so to speak.
And one point, just kind of to tack onto that as well, I think one of the most effective sorts of user awareness trainings that I think we encounter is practical sorts of exercises, like where you do like phishing campaigns against your own employees to see who's actually going to click on these emails, right? And use that as sort of like a learning experience, right? So not necessarily to kind of punish somebody that clicks on something, but just so that they realize, all right, this is how easy it is to kind of fall prey to this, and I can sort of take away something positive from this experience. So hopefully when the real thing comes in, I don't actually kind of click on that link. So I think those have been very effective for a lot of organizations, just to educate people more effectively rather than just having like a PowerPoint somebody sort of kind of sits through.
That's a great one, and thank you for that, because CISA actually has a service, which is our phishing campaign assessment, that we can do that for your organization over a 6-week period, and varying the levels of sophistication of those phishing emails. But other vendors do provide that too, and then you can do it yourself at your own leisure. But that is something that you can ask CISA to do for you as well.
All right, so I said last question earlier, but much like the scammers, I lied, because we've got a great question from Dr. Harris in DuPage County. And he says, what is the largest risk for local government bodies? And we haven't talked about local governments here. Is it any different than in the private sector?
So in my previous life, I was state government and working very closely with the local governments in Wisconsin, and we created our cyber response teams, and those teams were like the volunteer firefighters to go out and help other communities. And we responded to many incidents, and what's happening is the same for them. It's the cyber criminals is the biggest thing that's going after them, and it's to try to make money. That's always at the top of the list. The other thing I'll note is every incident we've responded to, not every, but most of the incidents we respond to, one of the things we hear from them is, hey, why did they pick on us? We're so small. How did they even know about us? And my standard answer to that is, hey, look, if you're on the internet, it's being scanned and they will find you. Whether you know that they're scanning you or not, it's happening every day. And they'll find your weaknesses and they will exploit them to the best of their abilities, whether it be through, weak employees that haven't been trained and click on a link, through those social engineering techniques, or an unpatched server, or even a server that's not configured properly. We just had this announcement on configuring your UPSs properly and changing that default password and ID. That's something that we run into a lot. The other thing we run into a lot of is remote access being open to the internet and not having multi-factor on it. Or in one sense, we had a police department that had a remote access out there, and the first letter of the ID was the first letter of their city, and then the next two letters were PD, and then the password was the same three letters, and that was the remote access that was being shared by all of their law enforcement officers to actually put in reports. And so you can imagine that was taken over quite easily.
Well, we're coming up on time. So William, Alex, and Eric, thank you so much for donating some of your time to help educate us today. And thank you for your service with the government, protecting all of us in the public, in the private sector each and every day. It is much appreciated. Thanks again to the representative and her staff for helping put this together. It's been an invaluable resource for the business community and our members. Hope you don't mind us sharing this information when this is over. Really thank you for your time. And then lastly, thanks all of you who took an hour out of your day to watch this and to get further informed about this critical topic. You guys are the first line of defense, and we appreciate your membership and all you do. So thanks, guys. Appreciate you all joining us today.